Gavin Newsom is on high damage control, completely brainwashing you, and say that the real problem is with the fire is free speech. Welcome to Doug in Exile.
And that's the problem we're having right now. There was no preparation for this. They don't prepare for anything. Kristen Crowley has been zeroed in on the DEI initiative. Her very first executive act as chief, was to spend $670,000 to do a nationwide recruiting campaign to pick up more LGBTQs in the command staff. Here's a fact. 120 women out of 3,400 men in the department. That makes up 3% of the membership. The command staff has about 40%, not only women, but LGBTQs in the command staff. 3% of the membership, 40% of the command staff. You tell me they're being promoted because of merit? No. They're being promoted because of who they sleep with and what color they are. And that's going to get me evacuated.
That's why you lost your house. Their priority is not on getting the job done in excellence. You can only have one number one thing. And it's either going to be merit based on what you do, or it's going to be the definition of how diverse is your patrol based on how much inclusion you have. Those often are at odds because they're two different standards. That's what's happening all across all of California, every university, all of the writing rooms in Hollywood, which was why no one wants to have their stories anymore. No one wants to watch their stuff anymore. Anywhere it's implemented, merit dives, it crumbles. Dude, it's already hard enough to run a business, hard enough to run a fire station, hard enough to beat a fire when you're hiring the very best.
People that were unprepared seem that they don't know how to handle their job, and now we have fires raging across the city. What would you like to see happen? Do you think they need to go? Does Karen Bass, she doesn't answer questions, does she need to go?
I have already called for Chief Kristen Crowley to resign. Deputy Chief Chris Larson, the big fat blob who's in charge of recruiting and DEI, should resign for her priorities. Chief Katie Kepner, who is in charge of Professional Standards Division, should resign. Captain Jennifer Wilcox, who is the city department's advocate, who has been actively firing firefighters, who is 5'2" with a 42-inch waist and a size 5 boot, should resign. None of these women belong in a command position. They shouldn't even be in the department in the first place, but they lowered the standards to such a degree that they'll let anybody in now.
If you can meet the standards, I don't care who you are, man or woman, but I don't want you lowering standards. It's the worst thing you can do. I know they did. They lowered it.
All of California lowered its standards. They lowered their standards for every position: police, firemen, teachers, university professors, students. They lower standards, trying to make the whole world more fair. If this is the fallout, it's going to get worse. This is just one disaster. What if an earthquake hit tomorrow? What if another pandemic hit? What if another disaster hit? What if your student needed an education from one of these teachers? You're screwed.
Well, we just received an evacuation order on not the fire behind me. The fire behind me, Grant, is, if you can believe it, the leading edge of the Palisades fire, which is physically about 16 miles away from me. The leading edge of it now is about 2 miles from my house. That's how big this thing is. But I'm going to turn around. This one behind me is the fire that just broke out in Hidden Hills. This is the one we're receiving the evacuation order on right now. It just broke out about a half hour ago, street level, which means probably arson, most likely arson.
We just had that news come in last night, where arson is, people are going around setting fires. They've caught a number of arsonists now. There's eyewitnesses of them. For those of you who don't know California, we used to hike around up in the mountains of the zoo, up to the observatory, all the way up to the Hollywood sign. And along there are encampments of homeless people. This is back in 2010. The homeless crisis that came 12 years later is insane. There's whole camp communities up there in those dry hills. That means that those fires probably were started by either junkies, and that's what they are, junkies and mentally deranged people, or flat out Antifa arsonists.
Really tell what politicians care about by how they spend your tax dollars. LA's Mayor Karen Bass earmarked hundreds of thousands of dollars for social justice art workers. the Gay Men's Chorus of LA, and the Midnight Stroll Transgender Cafe. She must really care about those things quite a bit. She also slashed $17 million from the city's fire department. She must care about that a little less. Now their city's on fire, but Karen believes not one single additional cent would make a difference fighting the infernos.
But can you address the criticism now over the budget issue and the slashing, $17 million slashing
I think
of the budget?
if you go back and look at the reductions that were made, there were no reductions that were made that would have impacted the situation that we were dealing with over the last couple of days. And
More
then there was a
firefighters on the
little
front
bit,
line would have
there
not
was a
helped.
little bit of confusion because money was allocated to be distributed later on, which was actually going to support salaries and other parts of the fire department that were distributed a little later. So I think it's most important to understand that we were in tough budgetary times. Everybody knew that, but that the impact of our budget really did not impact what we've been going through over the last few days.
Yeah, no one believes that.
That's Karen Bass, known communist, and she's lying about the money being spent later because they canned the fire department. They cut $17 million. So that means they weren't able to hire, weren't able to train, weren't able to use it. She goes, no, I didn't do anything wrong because we're going to use it later. When? After fire season? After your vacation?
And frankly, Grant, this fire should never have started, the Palisades fire. You're talking about Kristen Crowley, the chief. Here's the problem. Gavin Newsom said there was pre-deployment. Lindsay Horvath, the supervisor, which, by the way, I'm going to run against in 26, said there was pre-deployment. And Chief Crowley said there was pre-deployment for the Palisades fire. That's a bunch of bull, buddy. I talked to the firefighters.
Paul,
They tell me there was no
in.
pre-deployment.
Let me jump in and let everybody know what pre-deployment is. When you are going to have a big event, you know the high winds are coming, the fire department will often pre-deploy their firefighters in and around the city, around the county, in places that are going to be most vulnerable. I'm with you, Paul. I've heard from firefighters that said they were at a level of 1/10 the level of pre-deployment that they should have been, and this is all because of budget cuts. It's all because of staffing constraints.
And there's the other side of the argument. The Republican or the conservative side is it's staffing constraints. It is governance that is the problem, not the weather. The weather's bad, but whichever side, this is kind of a competition. Who would do better with a weather crisis? No different than Ron DeSantis dealing with a hurricane. Would it be a Democrat government or a Republican government? And the Republican government is about taking responsibility and going in and doing as much as you can. And you'll see every Democrat dealing with this fire, blaming someone else, passing the buck. No, I can do better. It's always someone else's problem. And most of all, the most amorphous person to blame is the weather. A weather isn't a person. You can't send the weather to jail. You can't try the weather. So they avoid and cover and protect all of their fellow Democrats that have burned this place to the ground. But especially, and Gavin Newsom's part of the cover-up, saying we had pre-deployment, but the guy sitting there stating the actual factual numbers, the actual numbers were 10% pre-deployment of what they would normally need according to their own protocols and their own rules.
I ask you, we've got to deal with this misinformation. There were hurricane force winds of mis and disinformation, lies. People want to divide this country, and we're going to have to address that as well. And it breaks my heart as people are suffering and struggling that we're up against those hurricane forces as well. And that's just a point of personal privilege that I share that with you because it infects real people that are out there, people I meet every single day, people the mayor's been meeting with, and they're having conversations that are not the typical conversations you'd have at this time, and you wonder where this stuff comes from.
Gavin Newsom's ready to fight a fire of misinformation. What about the physical fire? Your place is still on fire when he made this statement. Talking to Biden, talking to Kamala Harris. This is another big TV, mass media brainwash you moment where he's saying the problem isn't the facts on the ground of the inferno. We have to stop this. We have to do censorship. We have to stop the counter narrative that says that this is a people problem. He's going to spend 4 years fighting narrative, not rebuilding buildings. I guarantee it. At first, I thought there might be a little, hey, I'm sorry, guys, we screwed up. Let me get to work on this and let me fix this. No, instead, he goes straight to propaganda mode. He doesn't realize that media complex, it doesn't work anymore. It's not there. No one believes you. No one believes the news. No one believes Joe Biden. You can still sit there and keep saying this stuff with a straight face. Have another press conference and watch how it just starts hitting Angelenos in the face. And now even some Democrat, hard blue Democrat voters in the Palisades, you're going to run this BS and it's going to hit them and they're going to look back at you and say, I don't believe it anymore. I'm not on your team anymore. Don't lie to me. You can lie to the other side all you want. But, it's really amazing how wise and how you have a clarity of mind when you don't have a house to put your family in anymore. These Democrats I hope they turn Republican, unless they're just so brainwashed and so far gone that they go, it's the wind. We couldn't have gotten the water reservoirs to pump water. No human being could have possibly gotten them filled.
The same exact thing. We don't even have enough firefighters to begin with. Recruiting is down. Everything else is down. We don't have enough apparatus because they're all in the repair shops, and we don't have enough engineers to fix those apparatus. This is squarely the blame of Kristen Crowley. And Grant, here I am. People call me a sexist all the time, okay? If men were in charge, men prepare for things. Women in charge react to things.
Now, you might think that's kind of harsh. Men prepare for things, women react to things. But I'm going to give you an example right now of Kamala Harris dealing with this thing. She's not about preparing for a fire. She's about reacting and concerned about the aftermath of how are we going to get insurance and payment. That's a reaction, not an action.
Sadly, many insurance companies have canceled insurance for a lot of the families who have been affected and will be affected, which is only going to delay or place an added burden on their ability to recover. And I think that is an important point that must be raised, and hopefully there can be some way to address that issue, because these families, so many of them, otherwise will not have the resources.
While the place is still on fire, she's talking about how insurance is going to rebuild because they do not want to address their own failure. And even now you can see in the aftermath, there's going to be another 2 opinions that you can believe. You can believe that all of this fire, all of this damage is not being rebuilt because of insurance companies that know that California is an insane place to do business, especially where they're not clearing brush around trees. And it's very litigious, so that is lawsuits everywhere. So that's one narrative. Kamala Harris is going to, and Gavin Newsom will blame the insurance companies for not being there. That's why we can't rebuild. Or they could blame, which is the truth, the Democrats have all of their giant bureaucracies and infrastructure that are by design made to stop rebuilding and to stop construction in the entire state. They won't remove those. They'll keep defending them and obfuscating, because that's what it means to be a Democrat.
The reduction has severely limited the department's capacity to prepare for, train for, and respond to large-scale emergencies, including wildfires. As the Golden State burns down, the left's misplaced priorities are being celebrated. A gay outlet published this weird puff piece, quote, amid Palisades fire, Los Angeles' first LGBTQ plus fire chief is proving lesbians get it done. The Palisades fire still 0% contained. That's not getting it done.
But they have a political narrative to put on your eyes. That's Pride magazine. They're going to keep declaring this a win, not because they're effective at fighting fires, but because they're effective at having a lesbian in control of the fire department. That's all they needed to know. You can burn the whole city down, and they're the most successful firefighters in the world because they hired the right police chief, and you can't criticize her or you're a phobe. I'm Doug in Exile, and look, here's another real cool video to watch.